The Vitrine. Chapter 1: The Geometry of Silence. The billboard on the corner of 57th and Broadway was 3 stories tall, a holographic display that shifted slightly as pedestrians walked past, giving the illusion that the woman in the advertisement was tracking them with her eyes. The eyes were a startling, icy shade of gray, rimmed with thick lashes. The cheekbones were architectural, sharp enough to cut glass, a genetic inheritance from a grandmother in the Balkans who had spent her life frowning at hard winters. The lips were parted just so, inviting yet terrified. Cleo Fox sat in the back of the armored sedan, watching her own face float above the city. It was raining in New York, a cold, miserable October drizzle in 2025, and the water streaked the window, distorting the hologram. For a second, it looked like the giant Cleo was melting. "The engagement numbers on the campaign are up 40%, her agent Marcus said. He was scrolling through a transparent tablet, the blue light illuminating his manicured cuticles. "They love the Ice Queen aesthetic. It's trending. Cleo Cold is trending." Cleo didn't answer. She was 25 years old, and she felt like she was 1,000. She shifted in her seat, the leather of her skirt crunching softly. It was too tight. Everything she owned was too tight, designed to remind her of the boundaries of her own body. "Are you listening, Cleo?" "I'm listening," she said. Her voice was low, slightly raspy. It was a voice that surprised people. They expected a bell. They got a cello. "Elias is meeting us at the Met," Marcus continued, not looking up. "Try to look alive. Last time the press said you looked statuesque, which is code for bored. We need ethereal tonight. Can you do ethereal?" "I can do whatever you pay me for," Cleo muttered, turning back to the window. She wasn't a person. She knew this. She had realized it somewhere around her 22nd birthday. She was an economy, a collection of assets, legs, hair, waist, eyes, managed by a board of directors that included her agent, her publicist, and her boyfriend. The car hummed to a stop in front of her building. It wasn't a home. It was a storage facility for a very expensive asset. The penthouse was all glass and steel, suspended above the city like a vitrine in a museum. She entered the apartment. It was silent. The air was filtered, smelling faintly of ozone and expensive lilies. Elias wasn't home yet. Elias Thorne, the man who owned half the data centers in North America, the man who had acquired Cleo 2 years ago at a charity auction in Milan. He didn't bid on her, of course, that would be vulgar, but he had monopolized her time, swept her onto his jet, and integrated her into his brand. Cleo walked into the bathroom and stared at the mirror. She began the ritual of deconstruction. She peeled off the false lashes. She scrubbed away the foundation that made her skin look like poreless silicone. She pulled her hair back into a severe knot. Underneath, she looked different. The Slavic melancholy her mother warned her about was there, etched around her mouth. She looked tired. She looked human. She hated this time of day, the transition. It was the only time she was herself, and she had no idea what to do with that person. The real Cleo Fox liked old maps. She liked the smell of yeast rising. She liked reading about astrophysics because it made her feel small in a good way, not a claustrophobic way. But nobody asked about the maps. The front door chimed. Elias was home. Cleo quickly applied a layer of moisturizer, smoothing the human away. She put on a silk robe. She walked out to the living room, pasting on the smile, the one from the billboard. "There she is," Elias said. He was handsome in a generic, algorithmic way. Perfect teeth, perfect suit, eyes that scanned everything for its resale value. He dropped his briefcase and walked over to her, kissing her on the cheek. He didn't kiss her lips. He didn't want to smudge her. "How was the shoot?" he asked, walking past her to the bar. "It was long," Cleo said. "The photographer wanted me to cry, but not make an ugly face. It's harder than it sounds." "Well, you're the best," Elias said, pouring a whiskey. He turned to look at her. He wasn't looking at her. He was inspecting her. "Wear the green dress tonight, the vintage Valentino. It matches your eyes." "I was thinking maybe the black pantsuit," Cleo ventured. "It's cold out and—" "The green dress?" Elias corrected gently, as if speaking to a child who didn't understand the rules of the game. "The pantsuit covers your neck. Your neck is your best feature right now. We need to show the line." He turned back to his drink. He hadn't heard her. He never heard her. He only saw the composition. Cleo stood there, the silk robe feeling like a straitjacket. "Okay," she whispered. The green dress. Chapter 2: The Synthetic Ghost. 2 weeks later, the request came in from the agency. "It's a full-spectrum bioscan," Marcus explained over the phone, "for the 2026 global campaign. They want to digitize you, Cleo. It's huge money. It means you don't even have to show up to the shoots in Tokyo or Paris. The AI handles the posing. You just collect the royalty checks. Cleo sat in the scanning booth. It was a white sphere filled with 100 cameras. Hold your breath, the technician said. A grid of lasers swept over her body. It mapped every pore, every follicle, the exact curvature of her iris. It stole her geometry. When the avatar was finished, they displayed it on the monitor. Cleo stared at the screen. A woman stood there. It was her, but it wasn't. It was Cleo without the fatigue. Cleo without the history. Cleo purified. Incredible, Elias whispered. He had come to the studio to watch. He was standing next to the monitor, his eyes wide. He reached out and touched the screen. The avatar smiled, a programmed, perfect smile. Can we have a copy of the file? Elias asked the technician. For home use? I have a holographic display in the library. Sure, Mr. Thorne. That night, Cleo woke up at 3 a.m. The bed next to her was empty. She walked downstairs, her bare feet silent on the marble. She saw a blue glow coming from the library. Elias was sitting in his leather armchair, a glass of scotch in his hand. In the center of the room, the hologram of Cleo was hovering. It was life-sized. It was wearing a dress of shifting light. Turn left, Elias said softly. The hologram turned. Smile, but softer, like you have a secret. The hologram smiled. It was the exact expression Cleo had tried to give him over dinner 3 nights ago, the one he had ignored because he was checking his stock portfolio. Perfect, Elias whispered to the ghost. You're absolutely perfect. Cleo stood in the shadows of the doorway, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. He wasn't cheating on her. It was worse. He was cheating on her with her. He preferred the version of her that couldn't speak, couldn't age, and obeyed every command. She was being replaced by her own echo. She backed away slowly, retreating to the bedroom. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Tears leaked out of her eyes, hot and salty. They don't want you, a voice inside her head whispered. It sounded like her grandmother. They want the doll. The doll doesn't get sad. The doll doesn't have ancestors who starved in the winter. The doll is easy. She needed to scream, but if she screamed, she would wake the neighbors and the press would report a breakdown. She needed a place to put the scream. Chapter 3. The Frequency. The microphone was cheap. She bought it with cash at a pawn shop in Queens, wearing a hoodie and oversized sunglasses so no one would recognize the face of the decade. She set it up in the walk-in closet of the guest bedroom, the only room Elias rarely entered because it was filled with her off-season clothes. The acoustics were deadened by rows of cashmere coats and unused ball gowns. She sat on the floor, surrounded by the fabric of her oppression. She plugged the microphone into a burner laptop. She downloaded an encrypted audio streaming app popular with dissidents and underground musicians. She didn't know what she was going to say. She just pressed record. Hello, she said. Her voice shook. She cleared her throat. She pitched her voice lower, softer, stripping away the media training cadence she had used for 10 years. I don't have a name here, she said to the void. You can call me V. She paused. What did she have to say? I live in a glass box, she said. Everyone looks in, but the glass is soundproof. I'm waving and they think I'm posing. I'm screaming and they think I'm singing. She talked for 20 minutes. She didn't talk about fashion. She talked about the feeling of dissociation. She talked about the specific loneliness of being touched by 1,000 people but held by no one. She talked about the book on quantum mechanics she was reading, about how observation changes the nature of the particle. I am the particle, she whispered, and I am collapsing under your gaze. She uploaded the file. Title, Static Noise, Episode 1. She expected 0 listeners. By the next morning, it had 50 downloads, and by the end of the week, it had 5,000. People were hungry for it. In 2025, the internet was a wasteland of curated perfection and AI-generated content. A real, raw human voice, articulate, broken, and undeniably intelligent, was a shock to the system. Comments began to flood in. User 77. Her voice, it sounds like she's sitting right next to me. Neon Drifter. Who is this? She sounds so sad, but so smart. I feel this. Voidwalker. Finally, something real. Cleo read the comments in the bathroom, hiding the phone behind a bottle of perfume. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of warmth in her chest. They didn't know what she looked like. They didn't know she was the most beautiful woman in the world. They liked her mind. She recorded every night. She read poetry she had written on napkins. She told stories about her childhood, changing the names and locations. She confessed her hatred for the color green. She was building a second self, a shadow self, and this self was free. Chapter 4. The Dissonance. 6 months later, Static Noise was a cult phenomenon. It was the #1 underground podcast in the city. There were forums dedicated to guessing the identity of V. Not Cleo was sitting at the breakfast table picking at a grapefruit. Elias was reading the news on his tablet. "Have you heard this?" Elias asked. "Heard what?" "This stream. Static Noise." He tapped the screen and Cleo's voice, her real voice, the one from the closet, drifted out of the speakers. "We are all just ghosts wearing clothes, hoping someone notices the haunting before they notice the hemline." Cleo froze. Her spoon hovered halfway to her mouth. "It's fascinating," Elias said, leaning back. "This woman, she's deep, tortured. You can hear the pain in her voice. It's very authentic." Cleo put the spoon down. "You like it?" "I love it," Elias said. "I listen to it on the way to work. It's so different from everything else. She talks about philosophy, art, isolation. It's incredibly sexy in a weird way. The mystery of it." He looked at Cleo. He looked right at her face, the face that masked the voice on the recording. "You should listen to it, Cleo," he said, a patronizing kindness in his tone. "You might learn something. She has this way of articulating emotions that I think, you struggle with that sometimes. You're very visual, darling. This woman is cerebral." The room spun and he was in love with her, but only the parts of her he couldn't see, and he was using her own soul to criticize her body. "Cerebral," Cleo repeated, the word tasting like ash. "Yeah, smart, complicated." Elias checked his watch. "I have to run. Don't forget, the gala is tonight. The theme is reflections. I ordered you a dress made of mirrored shards. It's going to be heavy, but it catches the light beautifully." He kissed her forehead. "Bye, darling." He left her alone with the grapefruit and the sound of her own voice playing from his abandoned tablet. "And the tragedy is," the recording said, "that even if I screamed my name, you would only hear the wind." Cleo stood up. She walked to the window. She looked at the city below. She was trapped in a loop. If she told him, "That's me," he wouldn't believe her. Or worse, he would be disappointed. He would feel tricked. He liked the fantasy of the sad, anonymous poet just as much as he liked the fantasy of the silent, perfect model. Merging them would ruin both. She went to the closet. She looked at the microphone. She hit record. "Tonight," she said, her voice hard, "I am going to a party. Everyone will be looking at me. And tonight, I think I'm going to break the glass." Chapter 5. Breaking the Glass. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed. The Reflections Gala was the social event of the season. The room was filled with mirrors, crystals, and people who spent millions to look like they didn't care. Cleo wore the dress. It was made of thousands of tiny, razor-sharp shards of mirrored glass sewn onto a mesh bodysuit. It weighed 30 pounds. Every time she moved, the glass clicked and chimed. She was a walking chandelier. It cut into her skin at the waist and shoulders. She stood next to Elias, who was beaming. He held her arm possessively. "Look at her," he said to a senator. "Dazzling, isn't she?" "Breathtaking," the senator agreed, staring at Cleo's chest. "Does she speak?" Elias laughed. "She doesn't need to." Cleo felt a cold rage crystallize in her stomach. It was sharper than the dress. She looked around the room. She saw the other women trussed up in uncomfortable couture, terrified of aging. She saw the men, confident and consuming. She saw the hologram of herself in the corner, part of the decor, smiling that programmed smile. Elias leaned in. "I have a surprise," he whispered. "I hired a sound engineer. We're going to play a mix of that podcast, Static Noise, during the main course. It's very avant-garde. High art meets low culture. I thought it would be edgy." Cleo turned to look at him. You're playing the podcast?" "Yes. Why are you looking at me like that?" "Elias," she said, "that's me." "What?" The voice. "The podcast. It's me." Elias stared at her for a second, then he laughed. It was a loud, barking laugh. "Oh, Cleo, you're funny. You barely read the news, darling. You couldn't write that stuff. That woman quotes Kierkegaard." He patted her cheek. "You're beautiful, Cleo. Don't try to be the smart one, too. It's greedy." He walked away to greet a donor. Cleo stood alone in the center of the room. The mirrors on her dress reflected the room back at itself, 1,000 distorted faces. She felt a vibration in her pocket, her phone. She had hacked the venue's audio system earlier that day. It was surprisingly easy. Elias used the same password for everything. She made her way to the stage. The lights were dimming. Dinner was being served. Elias was at the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "tonight we reflect on beauty, and to accompany our meal, a voice that has captured the city's imagination." He signaled the DJ. Cleo stepped up behind him. She was uninvited, unexpected. The spotlight hit her and her dress exploded with light, blinding the front row. She took the microphone from the stand before the audio track could start. The room went silent. The face of the decade never held a microphone. "Hello," Cleo said. The voice was unmistakably the one from the podcast, the same timbre, the same cadence. Elias froze. He turned slowly to look at her. "I don't have a name here," Cleo said, quoting her first episode, "but you call me Cleo." A murmur went through the crowd. "For years," Cleo continued, her voice gaining strength, echoing off the high ceilings, "I have been a surface. I have been a canvas for your desires. I have been a girlfriend, a mannequin, a trend." She looked directly at Elias. "You love the voice in the dark, Elias. You told me she was cerebral. You told me I could learn from her." Elias's face was pale. He looked sick, not because he was wrong, but because the illusion was collapsing. The object was speaking, and it was ruining the aesthetic. "I am the voice," Cleo said, "and I am the body, and I am tired." She reached up to her shoulder. The dress was held together by a single clasp. "You want the reflection?" she asked. She unclasped the dress. It was heavy. She let it slide off her shoulders. It crashed to the floor with the sound of a shattering window, a massive pile of broken glass, and expensive engineering. Underneath, she was wearing a simple, nude bodysuit. She looked small, she looked human. She stepped out of the pile of glass. "I quit," she said. She dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a heavy thud that echoed through the silent hall. She walked off the stage. She walked down the center aisle. No one moved. They were too shocked. The statue had climbed down from the plinth and walked away. Elias shouted after her, "Cleo, you're ruining everything, the contract!" She didn't turn around. She pushed open the heavy double doors of the museum and walked out into the cold New York night. Chapter 6. The Exit. She walked for 40 blocks. The rain had started again, washing away the hairspray, soaking the bodysuit. She found a bodega on 2nd Avenue and bought a pair of gray sweatpants and a frantic, oversized I Love NY t-shirt with a $20 bill she had tucked in her shoe. She changed in the bathroom. She threw the bodysuit in the trash. She walked a few more blocks until she found a diner that smelled like old grease and coffee. It was empty except for a trucker in the corner and a waitress who looked like she had seen everything and was impressed by none of it. Cleo sat at the counter. "What can I get you, hun?" the waitress asked, chewing gum. "A cheeseburger," Cleo said. "And a milkshake, chocolate." Coming right up. Cleo looked at her reflection in the napkin dispenser. Her hair was wet and stringy. Her makeup was smeared. She had bags under her eyes. She looked ugly and she smiled. It was a real smile, wide and messy. A young man sat down 2 stools away. He was wearing headphones, scrolling through his phone. He glanced at her. Cleo tensed. She waited for the recognition. She waited for the phone camera to come up. "Oh my God, is that Cleo Fox? She looks like a wreck." The man looked at her for a second longer. Then he shrugged and looked back at his phone. "Rough night?" he asked, pulling one earbud out. Cleo looked at him. He genuinely didn't know. Without the lighting, without the diamonds, without the Photoshop, she was just a girl in a diner eating a burger at midnight. "Yeah," Cleo said, "but it's over now." "I feel that," the man said. "Hey, you listen to Static Noise?" Cleo paused. She took a sip of the milkshake. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. "I've heard of it," she said. "New episode just dropped," the man said. "It's just 10 seconds of silence and then the sound of glass breaking. Pretty wild." "Yeah," Cleo said, watching the rain hit the window. "Pretty wild." She took a bite of the burger. Grease ran down her chin. She didn't wipe it off. For the first time in her life, she was full.